Welcome to shul.com. We are here at the Surfside Kolel Boker and we are beginning a new book. It's a book of Mussar. It's called Shema Beni. Here's the cover. It's a interesting book for a few reasons. One, I got this as a gift from Rabbi Daniel Gladstein. He's one of my rabbis, a friend, a teacher, mentor in my life. And furthermore, the author of this book is actually a rabbi that lives here in Miami. It's Rabbi Binyamin Pinchas Lubin. He's a rabbi in Toras Chaim, Toras Emes in the high school. And it's an unbelievable book. There is a certain chokhmah in Mussar, more than just the ability to see it as a subject. There is a depth to the subject in and of itself, and this book discusses it. It's a big book. But I've skimmed through it. I saw a lot of good, and so Be'ezrat Hashem, we're going to begin this book in order to understand the depth of Mussar. Mussar is another word. You might call it for hashkafa. You might call it might be another word is philosophy. The orchot hayim, the ways of life. So let's take a look. Darche Mussar she'ela ma yesod derech hamussar shel Slabodka. What is the foundation of the Mussar of Slabodka, and where did the wise people of the Mussar argue? Where is their discussion? Why do they have different schools of Mussar? There's the school of Rabbi Salat. You have the Saba Mikelem, the Saba Mislabodka, Novhar Dork. There's many different schools. So what is the difference about it? Teshuvah. Hagaon Hatzadik Rav Zundel Misalant Zatzal Amar the Rabbi Salanter Sheikar HaMussar Yesh Lidmon Midivrei HaMesilat Yesharim. So the majority, the most important part of Mussar is to learn from the book Mesilat Yesharim. V'chein et derech HaMussar shel Slabodka nitan lidmon betichilat divrei HaMesilat Yesharim. And the way of the Mussar of Slabodka you should learn from the beginning of Mesilat Yesharim. He has a note here. Katuv Besof Sefer Shvilei Hayim from Rav Hayim El Azari, Gedolei Talmidei Hasaba Mislabodka, שכמו שהתורה לפי ביאורנו אין לה שיטה אחידה, מפני שהיא מקפלת תחתה את כל גילויי החיים על כל גווניהם בצורותיהם השונים. Because the Torah, like we explained, has no one way, there's no one answer to the Torah. מפני שהיא מקפלת תחתה של את כל גילויי החיים על כל גווניהם בצורותיהם השונים. It's all different ideas of life in different stripes and colors and ways. Can gam hasaba. Just like that is the Saba. Shekol Yamav, all of his days, Yageya ve'amel bechol me'odo lehat'im v'teritzonotav l'rishon Hashem. All of his life, he worked and put a lot of effort into matching the will of his life to the will of the Torah. אי אפשר היה לו להיות כפות לדרכים קבועים ושיטות מסוימות. He didn't have the time or the interest in having different pathways and different shitot. What he's trying to say is that he was so focused in and of itself of the practice of correcting his life and matching his life and will to that of God, following the Mesilat Yesharim, that he didn't have even a different shita. Okay. Katav HaMesilat Yesharim in Perek Aleph, Yesod HaChasidut, the foundation of Chasidut, V'shoresh Avodah, and the root of all work. Hatemima, the pure one, who sheyitbarer v'yit'amet etzel ha'adam ma chovato be'adamo. What is the foundation of Hasidut is to know what is your purpose in this world. Why are you here? Why do you have life? Why are you located in the place that you are? ולמה צריך שישים מבטו ומגמתו בכל אשר הוא עמל כל ימי חייו? And where should you put your effort in the time and in the place that you are in? So the question is, מה חובתו? What are you obligated in? And two, Now that you're here, what do you have to do? והנה מה שהורונו החכמים ז"ל הוא שהאדם לא נברא אלא להתענג על השם, that you were only created in order to have pleasure on God, להתענג על השם וליהנות מזיו שכינתו, and to have pleasure from his divine presence, שזהו התענוג האמיתי והעידון הגדול מכל הדברים שיכולים להימצא. And this is the greatest pleasure that exists on earth. So he says two things, להתענג על השם וליהנות מזיו שכינתו. Two things which need a lot of clarification. What is Oneg Hashem? We know Oneg Shabbat, that on Shabbat, how do you have Oneg? You pleasure yourself in certain ways with good food, good drink, doing certain positive, permissible things on Shabbat. That's how you have a pleasure on Shabbat. So here you have to have pleasure on God. להתענג על השם וליהנות מזיו שכינתו. ביאור דבריו, כשם שבבניין גשמי צריך לבנות תחילה את היסוד כדי שיתקיים הבניין. Just like when you build a building of material structure, before you build it you have to put a foundation. ואם לא יעשה כן בוודאי ייפול ארצה. And if you don't put a foundation, then everything you built on top is going to fall. כן בבניין רוחני, just like that in a spiritual building, צריך לבנות תחילה את היסוד. First you need to build the foundation of your spiritual life. ואם לא יעשה כן, בוודאי לא יתקיים. And if you don't do that, you are definitely not going to succeed and be around. וכשם שבבניין גשמי, גודל וחוזק היסוד הנצרך תלוי בגודל הבניין שרוצה לבנות. And just like when you build a tall building, the foundation is not going to be the same as a 1-story or 2-story structure where you might put a small footing. So you have to think, am I building this foundation for a 80-story skyscraper, or am I building a 1-story warehouse where I just want to put a simple foundation? And as the building gets taller, you have to strengthen the foundation. It's very good analogy. כן, בבניין רוחני, כפי גודל הבניין, כן צריך לגדל ולחזק את היסוד. And just like a spiritual building, you need to do the same thing. לכן, כדי לקנות את המידה העליונה של חסידות, in order to acquire and buy this trait, this elevated trait of חסידות, צריך יסוד גדול חזק עד מאוד. You need to have a very good foundation. Now again, when we're talking about Hasidut here, we're not talking about what you might classify as Hasidim, as those who dress in certain black garments, white shirts, and they're known as Hasidic. That's not what we're talking about. Here, we're talking about Midat Hasidut. There are plenty of Hasidim that may not have Hasidut in the realm that they're talking about here. And there might be people that don't look like Hasidim and have plenty of Hasidut. So Hasidut is talking about personal growth and work. And we're going to get into garbs a little bit later on in the book. Yes, he discusses that. And this is what the author of the Mesilat Yesharim put forth. That the foundation of the spirituality of Hasidut that a person needs to see and understand what is his chovah, his obligation in this world that he's in. And what to put your effort in. Now we're going to explain what is your obligation in the world. And this is the foundation and the root to all the spiritual growth. הוא שהאדם לא נברא אלא להתענג על השם ולענות מסביב שכינתו, שזהו התענוג האמיתי והעידון הגדול מכל הדברים שיכולים להימצא. He tells you again that all this, a person was created in order to be מתענג, to have pleasure on God and to enjoy from his divine presence. רוצה לומר שכדי לזכות במדרגה העליונה של חסידות ובעבודה תמימה, that in order to get to this place of this high elevated point of avodah, work and hasidut התמימה, צריך שיתפלל ויתעמת את ג' העיקרים הללו. You need to explain and understand these three important concepts. One, sheyesh lo chova be'olamo, that first, you have an obligation in this world. You didn't just come here for the purpose of life. There was an obligation. You came here for a reason. You're on a mission. Bet, she'adam lo nibra ela litaneg al Hashem v'lalat mizir shechinato. He puts these together, that a person was only created in order to have pleasure on God and to enjoy from His divine presence. And Gimel, shezehu atanu gameti ha'idun hagadol mikol ha'idonim she'echulim limatzeh. And three, important, that this is the most pleasure that you can get on earth. That's it. If you know the key of how to get what he's telling you, that is the most pleasurable feeling that a person can get. He has a bunch of notes, so let's read some of the notes that he has here. Why did the Ramchal, Rabbi Moshe Chaim Luzzatto, start his book on the foundation of Hasidut Hareh? Katav Ramchal shemekotem tzarich la'abod al zehirut, that before a person begins his pathway to Hasidut, there is actually a list of things he has to do. One of them is called zehirut, being careful, zerizut, being quick, nikiyut, being clean, perishut, absolving yourself, tahara, purifying yourself, achar yesh la'abod al Hasidut. So there's a process. So why did he originally begin in a different way, not the process that you have here? It should have started not Yesod HaChasidut, Yesod HaZehirut, because from there you build up on the steps to go up to Hasidut. So first you will buy and acquire this midah, this trait, and then you work your way up. שכדי להתחיל לעבוד לקנות מידות טובות צריך שתהיה לאדם שאיפה לקנות את המידה העליונה של חסידות. That why did he begin differently? Because before a person goes to learn the path to the level of Hasidut, he first has to have a she'ifa. He has to have a desire for what we're talking about. Because without a desire to learn it, how is he going to acquire this? אלא דלפי זה קשה. למה התחיל הרמח"ל את ספרו ביסוד החסידות? So why did the Ramchal started with the foundation of Hasidut? But למה לא התחיל את ספרו ביסוד הקדושה? Why don't you start it with the foundation of Kedusha? Kedusha is holiness. Holiness is the separation of things. שהרי כתב הרמח"ל שאחר החסידות באה הענווה. That the Ramchal wrote that after a person focuses on Hasidut, he gets to a place of being humble. Yir'at chet, fearing sin, v'kedusha, holiness. V'shamati, שיש אומרים שסבר המסילה ששם שחדש להתחיל לעבוד די בזה שיש לו שאיפה להגיע למידת החסידות. That if a person, and I heard that the Mesilat Yesharim had the thought and the machshava that if a person would begin with this, then he will end up having the she'ifa, the desire, in order to have hasidut. But a person doesn't need to have a desire in order to get holiness. A desire for hasidut he needs, but not a desire for holiness. והנה איתה בעבודה זרה דף כף עמוד ב' אמר רבי פנחס בן יאיר תורה מביאה לידי זהירות. Torah brings a person to carefulness. V'zehirut mevi'ah lezerizut, that brings a person to being quick. Zerizut mevi'ah le'nikiyut, and the zerizut brings to being clean. Nikiyut mevi'ah le'perishut. Perishut is absolving a person from certain things. Perishut mevi'ah le'tahara. V'chud v'hasidut gedolah mikulam, and hasidut is the greatest of all of them. Shneimar az dibarta b'hazon lechasidecha upliga. The Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi, the Amar Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi, anava gedolah mikulam. And Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi had a different discussion. He agreed that being humble is the greatest of all of them, more than Hasidut. וכתב הגאון רבי יעקב חיים סופר שליטה in the Sefer דרוף תקה דאורייתא חלק ב' עמוד מ"ח שכתוב בהקדמת הרמח"ל למסילת ישרים דפוס ראשון, in the first printing of the Ramchal of the Mesilat Yesharim, שהוא הכריע כמאן דאמר חסידות גדולה מכולם, that he held, the Ramchal, that Hasidut is greater than everything, even the Anava. וקשה. אם חסידות גדולה מכולם, if חסידות is greater than all of them, it's difficult. למה מנה הרמח"ל חסידות קודם ענווה? Then if that's the case, that it's greater than all of them, Hasidut, lama mana, why did he count the Ramchal Hasidut before Anava? Why would it should be the other way? Why would he put Hasidut first if Hasidut was on the highest level, not Anava? And then Yirat Het and Kedusha, V'tiretz Hagaon Sofer, Shehama'ala Shel Hasidut Gedola Ma'amalot Shel Anava, that even though Hasidut is greater than being humble, Yirat Het, fear of sin and holiness, Mikol Makom Sabara Ramchal, that first you need to work on Hasidut, and then later on being humble, on your atchet, fear of sin, and then kedusha, holy separation. It's much easier to get the trait of Hasidut than to acquire the trait of being humble, fear of sin and holiness. וכן משמע ממה שכתב המסילת ישרים פרק י"א, מידת הענווה אשר מפני הקושי הגדול שיש בהשקעתה הוא שמע בדברי רבי פנחס בן יעל מן האחרונות. ולפי דבריו עתי שפיר שהתחיל הרמח"ל את ספרו יסוד החסידות, משום שכבר מתחילה צריך שתהיה אדם שאיפה להגיע למדרגה העליונה, והיינו למידת החסידות, that a person has to have a desire to get the Hasidut, to want Hasidut in order to fully learn and acquire it. ולפי דבריו, למה כתב המסילת ישרים יסוד החסידות ושורש העבודה התמימה? Why did he write the foundation of Hasidut and the root of work, of pure work? ולמה לא כתב יסוד החסידות והעבודה התמימה? Why did he just write the foundation of Hasidut and of work, pure work? וראיתי כתוב בספר מלחמת יהושע עמוד 12, צריך להבין בשביל מה אצל חסידות כתב יסוד ואצל העבודה כתב שורש. Why when it came to Hasidut he said a foundation יסוד, while when it came to עבודה he said a root שורש. ובילדותי ראיתי, in my childhood I saw בספר של רבי יהושע הלר מהורדנה שכתב in שרגי נפישי עמוד 100 בהערה, כי החסידות הווה מה שעושה לפני והעבודה הווה מה שמוכרח לקיים על פי הדין. והנה מי שנטע, he says that because the Hasidut is what a person does לפנים משורת הדין. What is Hasidut? That a Hasidut is what someone does above and beyond the law. והעבודה, the work, הווה מה שמוכרח לקיים על פי הדין. Avodah is something you have to do. Hasidut is above and beyond. It's extracurricular. So he says, the Hasidut is above and beyond, while the Avodah is your requirement. That a person who plants something in the ground, even if he doesn't want it to grow, if he planted it, chances are it's going to grow. The growth is no longer from his will. Once a person plants something, whatever he's going to plant, something's going to grow from it. Whether or not it grows is not his will anymore because he already planted it, he walked away from it. But someone who puts down a foundation to build a building, but would a building just grow in and of itself? So that's why he's asking the question, why when it came to Hasidut he said the word Yesod, foundation, while when it came to Avodah it said Shoresh, because when it came to Avodah, the Avodah is something that's being planted that's just going to grow in and of itself, while Hasidut is something that you need to actually build. You need to build a foundation and to build a structure with it. It's not going to be built on its own, while when it came to Avodah, if you planted good seeds, then it's going to grow by itself. וזה מה שכתב רבנו משה חיים לוצאטו, יסוד החסידות היינו כמו מי שהניח יסוד אין הכרח שיבנה הבניין. And furthermore, the Ramchal is saying that just because somebody worked on building a foundation for Hasidut, it does not mean he has Hasidut. He built the foundation, he set it up, but he didn't actually build the building. כן, מילא דחסידות אין הכרח עליו לקיים. He may not even follow the words of the Hasidut, or even be obligated to. That it's all dependent on his will whether he wants to do it. Because remember, Avodah is a requirement, Hasidut is above and beyond. V'shoresh Avodah hu כמו מי שנטע שורש בארץ. And the foundation of avodah, the root of avodah, is the same way like someone who planted in the ground. That's for sure something's going to grow from it. Hopefully not any wild plants or weeds. It'll be something positive. It says, and that's avodah is a mukhrach. You have to do it. And it's not dependent on your will. While with Hasidut, it's dependent on your will. You don't have to be a Hasid. You don't have to go that way. But of course, from what we see here, especially what he's mentioning, that this is the biggest ta'anug and pleasure that exists on earth, according to the Saba Mikelem and the fathers of Mussar and the Ramchal. V'li nira, and to me it seems, the Ba'ed Divrei Rabbeinu Moshe Chaim Lutzatu, דבא ללמוד לבני האדם שכל אחד מחויב לטהר ולהזדכך את עצמו ולהתאבק במצוותיו של הקדוש ברוך הוא. That every person has to purify himself and prepare himself in order to connect himself to the mitzvot of God עד שיגיע למדרגה כזו, in order till you get to this point. שלא יהיה לו שום מניעה והפרעה בעת שבא לקיים מצוות השם לעבוד עבודת השם. You shouldn't have anything in your way or preventing you in order to מקיים, in order to fulfill the commandments of God. וזה הווה ביעוד במסילת ישרים. And this is the explanation of מסילת ישרים, יסוד החסידות. The foundation of Hasidut, the Hasidut הווה יסוד. That Hasidut in and of itself is actually a foundation. Learning Hasidut is a foundation. היינו, דמילי דחסידות אין צריכים שיהיה מוטבעים. דזה תלוי ברצונו. That all of the words of Hasidut is all dependent on will. ושורש העבודה, העבודה הווה שורש. That the avodah work is the root. היינו, בנוגע לעבודת השם, זה הווה שורש לצריך לשדל שיהיה מוטבעים. באדם ולא יהיה לו שום מניעה והפרעה, ולא יצטרך לאמצעים ותחבולות לקנות אותם. That when it comes to doing mitzvot, you should have nothing preventing you or in your way, and you shouldn't need any middle men or middle things in order to acquire mitzvot and learning Torah. כל אדם השומר תורה ומצוות יודע את גימל העיקרים הללו. Anybody who protects the Torah, learns the Torah, does the mitzvot, he knows these three important messages. ומכל מקום, רוב בני אדם לא הגיעו למדרגה של החסידות והעבודה התמימה. Most people don't ever reach this level of Hasidut and pure work of עבודה. וזהו משום, and this is because שלא נתברר ונתאמת. It wasn't clarified fully to the person. אצלם גימל העיקרים הללו. יש דברים שהאדם יודעם בשכלו. Some things a person knows in his intelligence and his mind. ומכל מקום אינו יודעם בבירור. He knows them in his mind, but doesn't really know them. He can't really explain it. He can't teach it over. He can't replicate it. He knows it. He got it. You know, sometimes someone says something, you got the concept, but do you got it well enough to teach it over, to explain it, to go build what he's stating? בכתב המסילת ישרים, שרק על ידי זה שידע את גימל עיקרים הללו בביאור בגמור, the מסילת ישרים is telling you, if you don't understand these three things in their depth, יבוא למדרגה העליונה של החסידות והעבודה התמימה, that you're not going to be able to get. If you want to get to the level of Hasidut Avodat Tamima, you need to fully grasp these three concepts that we said, which are earlier, that you have a Chobah Be'olamo, you have a requirement in this world, that mankind was only created to have pleasure on God and to enjoy from His divine presence, and the third one, that this is the most pleasurable thing that exists on earth. כדי שיתבררו ויתאמתו העיקרים הללו, צריך עמלות רבה. In order to fully understand these things, you need real work in understanding the depth of these concepts. ותכלית הספר היא לעזור לבני אדם שיתבררו ויתאמתו אצלם מה חובתם בעולמם. And the purpose of this book, the reason why we're learning this Shema Beni of Rabbi Lubin, is to understand what is your purpose in this world. It's a simple question, one that many people live their entire life and don't really answer. And they just go by day doing physical activities, not knowing what is your mission. What are you here for, 007? וכתב הרמח"ל בהקדמתו. The Ramchal wrote in his introduction, והנה, על פי הברייתא הזאת, הסכמתי לחבר חיבורי זה, ללמוד לעצמי, להשכיל לאחרים תנאי העבודה השלמה למדגרותם. And the Ramchal wrote in his introduction that I put together this braita, this entire writing, in order to teach myself and to remind others the conditions of work, of avodah shlema, and all the steps. And I'm going to explain each and every one of these steps and things, how to acquire them, what are the losses of not, and how to protect them. And everybody who ends up reading it will find in it pleasure. It seems that he wrote the book originally for himself. That even the Ramchal had a difficulty to write this whole book. That even he had work to figure out what was his chovah and purpose in the world. Seemingly writing the book and teaching others was part of it. He has here on the bottom, כתב הרמח"ל בהקדמה לספר מסילת ישרים, כי כבר אפשר שלא ימצא הקורא בשכלו חידושים אחר קריאתו שלא היו בו לפני קריאתו אלא מעט. You might read this whole book of the Ramchal and not actually learn anything innovative. You might know everything in the book might be things that you already know. And so you might say to yourself, okay, so what did he tell me? Sometimes just being reminded of what you know and having further clarification is in of itself a new study. Kol sheken shelo katuv b'sefer chidushim shelo yeda'am haRamchal atzmo. That the Ramchal knew all these things. Va'afilu hachi hu sach lichtov et hasefer ba'ad atzmo. And even though he knew these things and they were well known amongst everyone, he wrote a book for himself in order to remind himself of it. That's a lesson in of itself. That even when you know something, you should write it and be able to encompass it. וזהו משום שהוא צריך לכתוב את הספר כדי שהוא יגיע למדרגה שהוא יודע את הדברים בביאור גמור. Because by writing the book and by putting his ideas down on paper, he was able to conceptualize and fully grasp all the concepts. וכן מוכח ממה שכתב הרמח"ל בהקדמתו, והנה הכתוב אומר, הן יראת השם היא חוכמה. That's brought down in Eov 28:28. That the fear of God is knowledge. Ramru Rabotenu zal Shabbat lamed aleph amud bet hen achat sheken bilshon Yevani korim leachat hen. That in Greek the one is a hen. Hare sheyirat. He's talking about the pasuk hen yirat Hashem hi chokhmah. So he's saying hen like the deferred one in Greek. Hen one yirat Hashem first is the chokhmah. That fearing God is wisdom, and that's a wisdom in and of itself, to know that fearing God produces wisdom, and that is wisdom. That something that's called chokhmah that doesn't have further clarification. But the truth is, all these things need a further depth clarification in order to understand them fully and truthfully, and not in just in an imaginary understanding or in a false understanding. And all the more so to, besides understand them mentally, understand them fully in depth, and then to be able to acquire them. To understand something, to acquire it, is two different levels. And that's why that just the fear of God is in and of itself a wisdom. There's a wisdom to that. It takes a lot of work and depth to really fear God and to fear heaven truthfully. More than trying to acquire all the wisdoms. So what he's saying here is that that the first wisdom is to understand that the fear of heaven is in and of itself a wisdom. It's a difficult thing to understand and conceptualize, and that is the that more than trying to get all the other wisdoms, that's the first one. And it says that Reshit Chokhmah Yirat Hashem, like it says in Tehillim, that the beginning of Chokhmah is the fear of God. And here he's saying that is in and of itself, that's a wisdom. The fear of God is not just something someone just acquires, okay, I fear God, or I love God. What does that mean? How did you conceptualize that? היוצא מדברנו שמוכיח מדברי המסילת ישרים שהדרך להגיע אל המדרגה העליונה ברוחניות היא על ידי זה שידע בבירור גמור מה חובתו בעולמו. That according to the Mesilat Yesharim, the way a person can acquire these levels is to know what is his chovah, his obligation. כפי השיעור שנתברר אצלו מה חובתו בעולמו. What is your obligation? כך תהיה מדרגתו ברוחניות. Once you know your obligation in the world, then you'll be able to have different levels of spirituality that you can climb. וצריך עמלות ועיון רב. It's a lot of work and a lot of investigation כדי שיתברר אצלו הדבר בבירור, in order to fully understand your mission. בזה היה אחד מעיקרי שיטת המוסר של שלובודקה. This was one of the foundations of the Mussar Slabodka שצריך לעבוד על השכל, that you have to work on your intelligence. להתברר, in order to explain, ולהתעמת אצלו יסודי הדעת. עכשיו נוכל לבאר מה במה נחלקו סלבודקה עם שאר דרכי המוסר. And so, with this beginning, we can start and go to the next phase, which we will begin tomorrow, of what were the different arguments amongst Slabodka in the ways and the paths of Mussar. So we could see from here a few important things. I think the most important that we're taking from today is that there is a wisdom in fearing God. It's not just, hey, I fear God. Okay, why? You fear him because he's the creator and controller of the world? Okay, there's more to it than that. There's actually a wisdom in fearing God and how that works. And also the three ikarim, that everybody has a chobah be'olamo, everyone has a obligation and a mission, that a person was created in order to have pleasure on God and to have pleasure and enjoy from the divine presence. And then the most important of the three is that pleasure of understanding the first two is the highest pleasure that exists on earth. And we'll continue tomorrow. Baruch Adonai Le'olam. Amen ve'amen.